So another trade deadline has come and gone. And this one was actually pretty similar to last year's. Well, kinda. I mean, some trades did go down, but not the ones that us fans were looking forward to. So in this video, I'm gonna quickly talk about the trades that did go down and then take a look at some of the bigger trades that didn't go down and talk about why they might not have gone down. So let's start off with the ones that did happen. Let's get the minor ones out the way first. Really minor ones. Well, first off, you got Roy Hibbert being shipped to Denver for $30. KJ McDaniels being shipped to Brooklyn for $50 in a protected second round draft pick. I believe it was 31 to 55 protected, so really, they're not going to get it unless Brooklyn all of a sudden becomes a top 4 team in the NBA. And then the Rockets traded Tyler Ennis to LA for Marcelo Huertas, who will most likely be waived by the time this video was up in a salary dump move, and the Hawks sent Mike Scott to Phoenix for a 2-piece and a biscuit. Alright, so now that we got that out the way, let's talk about the actual trades. You know, the ones that were good trades, but maybe not the big ones that the fans were expecting. First up, Nerlens Noel has been traded to the Dallas Mavericks for Andrew Bogut, who was in the process of being bought out if he hasn't been bought out already. Justin Anderson and a first round pick. Now at first glance, this seems like a trade that Philly would do, as they'll swap anyone that's not named Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid for a first round draft pick, but the pick was protected. Top 18 protected to be precise, which basically means they're not getting it, because I don't see the Mavericks being good enough for the rest of the season to make it to the playoffs and fall to like the 19th pick in the draft. However, if the Sixers don't get the pick, then that first round draft pick automatically becomes Dallas's 2017 and 2018 second round draft picks, which makes sense. I mean, there was no way that Philly was going to give up Noel for basically nothing at all. But still, you can't help but to feel as if Philly could have gotten more for him. I'm sure there would have been some other teams out there that would have or should have been willing to give up flat out their first round pick for that guy. That being said though, this was an amazing trade for Dallas. They get an extremely athletic big who they can pair next to Yogi Ferrell, and they also just waived Darren Williams and handed over the keys to the franchise to Yogi, or at least the point guard position to Yogi, and they also still have Harrison Barnes. So when you think about it, this has been a very successful rebuilding season for Dallas so far. I mean, they started off the season just bad. Sure, they had Harrison Barnes, and it was nice to see that he can produce given the minutes and the touches, but really no one else on that roster was an obvious part of their future. And then they stumble upon Yogi, and now trade for their center of the future in Noel. And on top of that, they're still going to have their lottery pick. Overall, I'm just happy for Noel, and the fact that he's now going to get the minutes he deserves, it will be able to showcase his talent. So the Bulls, not quite sure what they are doing here. Now, they needed more shooters. You heard about them shopping Mirotic hard, and I knew right off the bat that that was going to be a tough sell considering Mirotic hasn't been playing well this season at all. But then they turn around and trade Doug McDermott and Taj Gibson and a second round pick essentially for Cameron Payne. Now they also got Jeffrey Laverne and Anthony Morrow, who Anthony Morrow is a shooter, but you know, he's been having an off year, or I mean an off couple of years when it comes to shooting. I think it's definitely safe to say that the Thunder won this trade. Sure, Payne could turn out to be a nice point guard for Chicago. OKC does have a good track record for drafting young players. He's recently coming off an injury, and even if his numbers don't show it, he has shown glimpses here and there of being a capable point guard in the NBA. But the Bulls based this trade off that he could become something. Possibly. And for the Thunder, they know exactly what they got. Doug McDermott, a guy who has been a bit inconsistent but is a guy that can knock down some open shots from you, which like the Bulls, the Thunder are desperately in need of shooters, so he will fit in just nicely. And they also got Taj Gibson, another guy that can run the pick and roll with Westbrook, a guy that will crash the boards and overall a very hard work and has some really underrated footwork in the paint for a big man. And on top of that, you get a second round pick too. You know, just an excellent trade overall for the Thunder as they continue to try and build around Russell Westbrook. The Toronto Raptors are all in. They went out and made yet another trade after acquiring Serge Ibaka. Now for them, it's more bench depth as they get PJ Tucker from the Phoenix Suns for Jared Sullinger and 2 future second round draft picks. The Eastern Conference playoffs are actually about to be pretty interesting this year, at least after the first round it seems. The Raptors are now in the best position they have ever been to challenge the Cavs. Just listen to their depth chart now. Of course, you have the same starting five of Lowry, DeRozan, Carroll, Ibaka, and Valanciunas. Then off the bench, you have solid players like Patrick Patterson, Norman Powell, and PJ Tucker. And as for what Tucker brings, he's a veteran that can play either the 3, or if you're going small ball, he can play the 4. He can stretch the floor, he'll be a great locker room presence, and that's another body you have to throw at LeBron James come playoff time, which is always helpful. Now, I know if you're not a Raptors fan, this wasn't the most groundbreaking trade or anything, but if you are a Raptors fan, then you should most definitely be excited about this pickup, especially since you really didn't have to give up too much for him. Alright, this trade didn't happen today, but it did come out later last night. The Wizards might not have gotten Lou Williams, but they did get someone who will for sure help their bench situation. They traded their 2017 first round draft pick. Quick shout out real quick by the way to Brooklyn for actually landing a first round draft pick. Major props to you guys. Now if you're someone who really doesn't follow Brooklyn like that, firstly, I don't blame you. And Bojan is a player who can for sure give you some bench production. He's averaging 14 points per game so far as a starter for Brooklyn. Now on almost any other NBA team, he most likely wouldn't be starting, but still, he's a guy that can come off the bench and give you a solid 10-ish points, which outside of Oubre's defense is much better scoring wise than you're getting from anyone else off that Wizards bench. So another solid pickup for Washington. Lastly, this was yet another trade that came out last night, and I'll just touch on it real quickly. Ersan Ilyasova has been traded once again. This time though, it was from Philly to Atlanta in exchange for 2 second-round draft picks. Like I said earlier, Philly loves their draft picks. On top of that, they have Dario Saric, who as of late has been flourishing in Philly. So this move does 2 things. Of course, it gets Philly some more draft picks, but on top of that, it also gives Dario Saric some more playing time. And I believe that's all the trades that went down. Now let's get into some of them that didn't happen. The Bulls still aren't ready to give up on Jimmy Butler. All of the Butler to Boston trade talk really died down after yesterday when the Bulls came on and said that they plan on keeping him. Whether or not Chicago still feels the same way once the season is over remains to be seen, but for now, it's looking like the Bulls are hoping for the best when it comes to the newly acquired Cameron Payne. And then they might try and do something this offseason, but we'll have to see what that brings. After the news broke out that Butler wasn't available, attention immediately turned to Paul George. There was a close call with the Lakers last night. A report came out saying that they were finalizing a trade for PG, but then trade talks just completely died. To touch on it real quick though, I think it might have been for the best if the Lakers didn't get him just yet. Now hear me out. If they're as confident as they seem to be when it comes to landing Paul George when he's a free agent in a couple of years, why would they want to trade away all of their assets for him now? Especially when, like I said before and many other times, they had to be as bad as possible this year in order to keep their draft pick from going to Philly. So instead of trading your young players away, let them develop, so if Paul George does decide that he wants to play in LA, he'll actually have some players to play with. But now on to Boston. Apparently it got really close. It was at the point where Indiana was like, look, you give us 3 out of the 4 between Jay Crowder, Avery Bradley, Jaylen Brown, or Marcus Smart, plus the 2017 Brooklyn pick, and we'll give you Paul George. I'm guessing Ainge thought that was too much, and to be fair, it kinda is. Look, the point of getting Paul George will be to make your team better and be able to compete for a championship. If you gut your depth in order to get him, then it's kind of counterintuitive. I'm sure Danny Ainge thought the same thing, and then, well, nothing happened. The Carmelo Anthony trade talks have really been dead for a while now. He came out earlier and said that he would only waive his no trade clause if it was a trade to Cleveland, Boston, or the Clippers. Some thought of a love for Melo swap, but there was really no way Cleveland was doing that. Boston came out and said that they really weren't interested in trading for him, and then the Clippers and Knicks just couldn't come to agreement that both teams liked. And the Melo talk really died after that. However, New York wasn't done though. Derrick Rose had been rumored to be in the process of being traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Ricky Rubio. Thibs wanted Rose again, and I guess New York did want Rubio. And for some reason, it just never happened. I saw a report that came out that said New York had offered Rose for Rubio straight up, and Minnesota was just like, nah fam, you good. And it just obviously never happened, but I don't quite know why. It seemed like a trade that was destined to happen, but who knows, who knows why it didn't happen. I thought that one for sure was going down. And yeah, that's basically all that happened. I mean, look, it wasn't the worst trade deadline ever. I mean, it wasn't as dry as last year. It didn't happen on the trade deadline day, but we still did have the blockbuster trade of DeMarcus Cousins to the New Orleans Pelicans. So that'll give us something to look forward to, seeing how the new Twin Towers thing works out in New Orleans. But yeah, just let me know what you guys thought though. You know, there was a lot of stuff that was hyped up to happen that never happened, so I can see why it would be kind of disappointing, but at the same time, at least we get to see some more NBA action as the games do resume tonight. And you guys do know what that means, that I'll be right back here tomorrow recapping the action from tonight's games and any other news that comes out. So if you want to see that, make sure you stay tuned and subscribe and keep getting the Buckets team SDC, and I'm gonna catch you guys later. Peace!